And all right, is it recording? So whatever. Audio input. Create a new one. I'm gonna. Alright, I better email Miriam. Alright, go. And might as well do one more. I sent one just a bit ago. A bit ago. Car parts, DNC, oh man. Today's a birthday. Today. Well, for $800. What if I? I didn't work, did it? Oh. Why are you meowing at me? Hi, Miriam. Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you. We're good. Okay.
What's happening to my body? Why can't I just wait? You may be
Good morning, everybody.
Hey, Gary, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Miriam, can you hear me? Okay. I just had, I was going to share a good experience that I just had within the last 5 minutes.
Oh, I'd like to hear it.
Yeah. So I just got a call from Colleen at the NAMI office. She received a call this morning from a lady in Greenville, North Carolina, whose son was arrested yesterday at Big Sky, Montana. And he was taken care of by a CIT officer, or picked up by a CIT officer in Bozeman. Bozeman has one of the first CIT teams in the state. And they recognized that he suffered from a mental illness and did not want him to put him in jail. And their crisis facility, the Hope House, was busy, was full. So rather than put him in jail, a sheriff's deputy from Gallatin County drove him 4 hours to the crisis stabilization facility in Hamilton, Montana, to keep him out of jail. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And a great deal of thanks goes out to the Gallatin County Sheriff's Department and the CIT officers. And well, it's really a good thing. So some things are working.
Right.
And we do have committed law enforcement people who are doing their best. And so it makes me feel good.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah. And I'm going to share that this afternoon.
So, just a quick reminder, when you introduced Miriam, remember to tell people to post their questions in the chat.
I've got it circled and starred.
Oh, good job, Gary. There is a question and answer button there at the bottom too, a Q&A button.
Right.
So it might confuse some people.
Okay. Me mostly.
Yeah, or me. There was quite a few people that registered. There was, let me see, I'm looking at it right now. There was 88 people who registered.
That's good.
Mm-hmm. Well, it looks like there's even more now. Let me see. 91 now. 91 people registered now.
Great. Great. I sent out some emails this morning.
Oh,
as a
good job.
reminder.
Good job.
Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear? Okay, good. We're good.
Just a minute. I have to send somebody a link to this webinar. Excuse me a minute.
Sure.
Hi, Miriam.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Matt Kuntz with
Hi,
Nami,
Matt.
Montana.
Hi.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today.
Sure.
We
Pleased
we
to
really
be-
appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I know Jessie Close pretty well from her
Oh, you do?
work in Montana. So
You know what? Maybe you could do me a favor, because although I'm on the advisory council of Bring Change to Mind, I've been unsuccessful at getting my book to Glenn and Jesse Close. Maybe you could help me send it to them.
absolutely.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah, I think I might have their address from a meeting that I was invited to a, a while ago. So I will chase that down, or worst comes to worst, you can send it to us, or we'll get one and drive it to Bozeman. So they,
Yeah, I can have the publisher will send you one.
okay,
That would
Well,
be cool.
wonderful. So
Yeah, I write a blog, a monthly blog for their website, but getting through the whole hierarchy there to actually get the book to them, I just couldn't accomplish it.
yeah, Nami, Montana can't relate to that at all. So our hierarchy is doesn't go very high. So, how's it going, Gary?
I'm doing just fine.
Oh, great.
Great news today. Colleen just called me about some CIT officers in Bozeman that did a wonderful thing yesterday.
Hey. And Tim, we're going to have one of our NAMI Helena members can't find the link. So Colleen is going to send an email to you with that NAMI Helena person's email to send them the link.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right. All right. And Tim, when are you going to open us up for the rest of the crowd, or can they hear us now?
Yeah, they can hear you.
Okay, great.
I think.
Is Matt introducing? I thought he wasn't going to do it.
So Gary, we're up to about 35 participants. Do you?
Yeah. Tim said 91 signed up.
Oh, wonderful.
But from how it went in the past, that not all of the people who registered make it.
Oh, I think with recording it and putting it up on our podcast and YouTube, the long-term reach that we get through these things can turn out to be really nice. Are you going to wait a little while, Gary, or you think that we're?
Well, I'm going to do
ready to
whatever.
go?
Well, I'm good. Tim, what should I do? I'm ready to go anytime.
Okay, go ahead and start.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, happy noon. My name is Dr. Gary Mihelish. I'm president of NAMI Helena, and I'm on the board of directors of NAMI Montana. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this series of webinars that NAMI Montana is sponsoring on mental illness in lieu of a state conference. Today, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Miriam Feldman, an artist, an active, and you can see the art back behind her, I think, and a mental health activist, an author. She is the writer of a recently released book. He came in with it. Yeah, a portrait. I don't know why it's backwards. A portrait of motherhood and madness. And I discovered Mimi through Pete Early's blog, which all of you should be on. And last summer, and I bought the book and I've read the book, and Mimi is a kindred spirit. And with that, I'm going to let Mimi take it away. A couple of things, just one thing to know. Mimi's going to give a presentation, and then she's going to answer and respond to questions. In the bottom of it, you will find a chat box. Go to the chat box. Don't go to the Q&A. And I will try to keep track of the questions, and Mimi will be answering questions at the conclusion of her presentation. So, Mimi, we're so glad you're here. You go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here too. I don't know what it's like there, but it's pouring in the Pacific Northwest. I'm going to start. So this is the book. He came in with it, Mirriam Feldman. And the cover is a self-portrait that my son did when he was 15. So you can see he's a pretty astounding artist also. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read just the beginning of the book, and then at the end I'm going to read another paragraph, and then I'll talk. I guess there were signs. There had to have been signs. I missed them all. So where does the story begin? Damned if I know exactly. I had me a son. I had a fat little baby boy with a mouth like a rubber band. My husband Craig and I surfed the labor waves together like champs. When my son came out of me, the room was oddly hushed. He was my first, so I didn't know what to expect, but it sure was quiet in there. No slap and cry, no nothing. Nick was blue and cold when he was born. We waited in the delivery room for his inaugural wail and heard only silence. Don't worry, dear, the nurse said. We just have to warm him up a bit. They placed him in an apparatus that looked like a toaster oven. Everything in the room seemed cold, frozen. My husband and I each held our breath. And finally, our son took his first, and we let ours out. I had my boy, deep dark eyes and a serious composure. All the fingers, all the toes. We called him Samuel as we had planned, and then after a day or two, Craig and I renamed him Nicholas, Nick. I'd had a beloved uncle with that name, so that was fine with me. Craig gave him the middle name Dylan after Bob. Nick, a normal, healthy boy. He was strong, he was adorable, his future was as bright as the goddamn sun. I would loll around and stare at that future of his like a baby myself, entranced with jangling keys. Now, Nick sits in a dark room all day, each day, and I wonder, what is he thinking? Who is in there? I see how people look at him. I can read my family's faces. I know that what has happened to him is a tragedy. But to me, he's in there, and his future is still ablaze, alone in his filthy apartment that I try to help keep clean. So that's the beginning part of the book. And so I'm a mom and an artist, and I guess now I've written a book, I'm a writer. And when I've got 3 daughters and a son, and when Nick first got sick, it was so out of left field. He had been just the most delightful child and had had quite a delightful childhood, and, you know, good grades and talented and friendly and funny and good in school. And then things started to fall apart. And it was interesting because I'd spent the first 15 years of my parenting career worrying about child abductions, cancer, and car crashes. And none of those things happened. And then out of left field, we were delivered serious mental illness, which was something I really knew nothing about and something that we had never even thought about. And so I was so ill prepared. I just didn't understand what's happening. And it took me a long time to catch up. You know, if you were to make a list of the red flags for serious mental illness and the list of normal teenage behavior, you'd have virtually the same list. They're all irrational, impulsive, confused, and those are all things that are symptoms of mental illness. So you look at your kid and you look at all the other kids and you go, okay, well, they're all acting crazy. And he'll grow out of it. But he didn't. It got worse. And he started not being able to keep up in school, and he started losing friends and losing connections. And finally, when he was about 16 or so, he had a suicide attempt. And when that happened, then we knew that this was something serious. It wasn't just normal teenager behavior. And so initially, at the same time, we also found out he was smoking pot and doing other drugs. Now, of course, now I know that he was most certainly self-medicating, trying to subdue the voices and all of that. But back then, we thought, okay, well, we have a kid with a drug problem. So we addressed it that way and sent him to rehab and therapy. And it just progressed over the years, his teenage years. He was first diagnosed with depression, then anxiety, then bipolar. And finally, when he's 20, they tell us that it's schizophrenia. Right out of the gate, I'm convinced I can fix it. I figure I grew him. I brought him into this world. Surely I can fix this. And so as ill prepared as I was, the fact that I just didn't even understand what was happening, there was a big lag time in finally starting to deal with it in a positive way. And along with the period of time where I thought I could somehow fix it, was also a long period of time where, of course, I was certain it was my fault. I was sure something I had done had caused this. You know, it goes back to I grew him. You know, I thought about, well, I did drink a couple beers before I knew I was pregnant, and I did take melatonin to sleep. Maybe the melatonin caused it. And I've spent, I still spend time doing these wild forensic audits of every minute of his life, trying to figure out what happened, like what caused it, what did I do wrong, or what wrong happened to him. And, you know, of course, there's no definite answer there, and there never will be, but it's a very hard thing as a mother, as a parent, to not take that onto yourself. So as he progressed through the different diagnoses, and I was struggling through trying to figure out how to cope with this. I was running a business and I had 3 other kids, and Nick was just spiraling out of control. My husband was not dealing with it well. And it was just overall too much. And the best thing that happened to me was shortly after the diagnosis of schizophrenia, somebody told me about NAMI. Specifically about the family-to-family program. Now, back then, it was 12 weeks. I've heard that now they've changed it and it's an 8-week program. But I have to tell you, I think that that family-to-family program saved my sanity and may have saved, you know, my family and Nick's life, really. Because having that big input of information, of facts about the medicine, the system, the hospitals, the police, all the different things that you have to learn, and also the science of the disease. It changed everything to me. After those 12 weeks, I went back to my life, to my family, with some tools to be able to start to navigate this field. And, you know, now I always tell everybody, because people write to me all the time, when they've read the book, and I talk a lot, and you know, not only at NAMI meetings, and I always talk about the family to family and how essential it is to just get yourself in there as soon as you know that this is what you're dealing with, because it'll save you. So I was, because of that, because of family to family and the enlightenment I got from there, I was able to move more quickly than finally past some of the things that a lot of people get stuck with. It may be family to family, it may just be my personality, but I was able to move really quickly past stigma. If you read the book, you'll see in the beginning, I spent a lot of time hiding and pretending everything was okay. And that's one of my biggest regrets, because all of that was time that I was not dealing with what was going on. And it did no good anyway. And it was very damaging to his siblings and everybody all around, this pretending everything's okay. And I used to sit in my living room and look out my big pane glass window in my, you know, nice old neighborhood in LA. And I would look out there and I would think, everybody out there has this clean, nice life. And behind my front door is this singular thing that's ugly and dirty. And I felt like I lived on an island. And that was a lot of the reason why I finally wrote the book, is I realized one day, boy, you know, if I had had this book to read, not that the book imparts any particular wisdom of how to deal with it, but it just to understand that I wasn't the only person in the whole world doing this. And this was 15 years ago. I realized that now people do talk more about mental illness, but I think serious mental illness still is something that people don't want to talk about and are afraid of, and people dealing with it feel extremely isolated. You know, when a family's child gets a disease, you know, a terrible disease like leukemia or cancer or something like that, the neighbors are lined up with the casseroles and the schedules to help and take care of them and support them. And, you know, I don't know what other people's experience is, but my experience was you could have heard a pin drop. I mean, nobody was there. And it's not because they weren't good friends. And I mean, I had a lot of wonderful friends who eventually did, but in the beginning, nobody knew what to do, because it's frightening to other people too. And that's also part of the reason I wrote the book, because I wanted to tell this story, and I don't come off particularly great in the book. I'm very honest. You know, when I sat down to write it, I decided, all right, the only way that this is going to have any real meaning is if I'm just completely honest. And so I was. And so you see me fumble, and you see me screw up, and you see me suffering, and you see me laughing, and you see our family having humor in spite of it all. And you see all of that. And I just thought, if I can get this story out into the world, and it might give other people a sense that they're not so alone, and that the chaos and the unhinged life that you are living, you're not so singular. You know, 1% of the population gets schizophrenia, and that's just schizophrenia. They say, I mean, you all know all the statistics about this. So, you know, mental illness is something that virtually touches everybody. Once you start doing the math and you realize even 1% of the population, that's a huge number. And they say 4% of the population deals with some sort of mental illness. And then you start extrapolating that out to family and friends and siblings. Everybody's dealing with it. And once I started talking about it, I realized that everybody was dealing with it. And to this day, I'm still constantly amazed at people who say, you know, I've never talked about this before, but now I feel like I can talk about it. And so once I got past that, and, you know, once you've had the police on your porch and the helicopters circling and all your neighbors out on their porches looking to see what's going on, and your son taken away repeatedly in handcuffs, screaming at the top of his lungs, you sort of give up trying to keep it a secret or trying to have any sense of hiding it. And now, this many years later, I have to say that for me, one of the really nice perks of having a son with schizophrenia is I'm officially embarrassment proof. There is absolutely nothing that can happen to me or around me that embarrasses me. And that's kind of a nice superpower. You know, you move through the world in a different way. And so, once I stopped the hiding, and once I realized that I had to just dispense with all these unimportant things like stigma or keeping a front up or being embarrassed, it put my priorities really in order in a very profound way that changed the way I live my life and made it much more, for lack of a better word, or authentic or honestly less phony. You know, I lived in a nice neighborhood in LA and surrounded by all these people with all these perfect families. And it was really hard to let go of wanting to belong in that. But I feel like my son's illness was actually a gift in that respect, because I also am freed of all of that. I officially don't care anymore. People think of me, and that's also kind of a nice superpower. So then we moved forward from there, and we started trying to deal with getting Nick stable and getting him on medication and getting him back to some kind of a semblance of a life. And, you know, it's a long, long road. And really, it's only recently that his life has started improving. We got him stable on medication, but he lived for years, basically like a zombie, you know, just in his apartment, taking his medicine, sitting alone in his apartment and not having really any kind of a life. And that was regarded as a success because he wasn't out of control. And that's one of the problems with the approach towards treating schizophrenia, is that my experience by and large has been at the point at which they're medicated and under control, their treatment is regarded as done. There's not additional help to get them out into the world and have a life and rebuild a life. You know, there are places that you can send them when they're in psychosis, and there are places that you can send them when they are doing better, but those places cost so much money that it's prohibitive. It's really reserved only for the ultra wealthy. And so as I started learning all of these things, then I realized, okay, I got to get involved here. I got to get involved with advocating, and I got to tell my story. So I started writing the book, and I got involved in all kinds of organizations and all kinds of activism and agitating and talking. And I really believe that one of the most profound things we can do is tell our stories, all of us, because what I see is a situation where we have a culture, we have a society that has decided that it is simply not going to deal with people with serious mental illness, that there's no place for them. And the jails have become the de facto mental health facilities, and there are less and less and less beds for them in hospitals. And there's very little sustained treatment, long-term treatment even available. And that's just wrong. You know, I look at my son and I think, here's a human being. You know, these kids, my kids, your kids, those of you out here with the lived experience, these people they have a right to a place in society. And we are living in a culture that virtually has relegated them to the prisons and the streets. And we drive right by them and we don't look at them and we don't think about it. And it's wrong and it has to change. And that's what I'm working for. And I don't think that we're doing them any favors by including them in our society. They have a birthright to it. They're human beings. I mean, it's just like people with other disabilities who have had to have the American Disabilities Act and things like that to sort of integrate them into our culture, because I think that the tendency is just to turn away, and especially with something like schizophrenia or severe psychotic disorders, because they are, let's face it, kind of scary. They can be violent. They're very off-putting. But most of the part of it that's off-putting and frightening is untreated psychosis. When they're treated, it's a whole other story. So that's one of the places where I put a lot of my energy. And the book doesn't really talk as much about that as it talks about the family experience and how you cope with it, and the trickle-down effect to the siblings, and the need to create treatment models that involve the whole family. Because I recently gave a talk to the psychiatric department at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. And they don't usually have talks from somebody like me who's just a mom. They get medical professionals in. But it was so well received, and I'm doing a lot more of them because these doctors and care providers were saying, you know, we hadn't thought of it from this point of view. I was talking to them about the fact that I, as mom, and a lot of times the mothers, but family members, fathers, everybody do, we're the ones who have the day-to-day experience with the patient. We're the ones who monitor their symptoms. We're the ones who know the ups and downs. And the fact that the door's shut on us and we're not included in the treatment model is impossibly wrong. And also the doctors aren't doing themselves any favors. Now, I know that SARDA and other organizations that I'm involved with are working to change the HIPAA laws and soften them in certain ways. But when I was dealing with it, there was nothing like that. I just had to be real wily, you know, and I figured out, I read the HIPAA and I realized that they weren't allowed to give me information, but that didn't mean that I couldn't give them information. So I created a very strong approach of insisting that they listen to what I'm telling them. And if they could give me time, I would send emails, but I would document what was going on. I would give my opinion. I would give them information. I would tell them what I thought the danger was. And eventually we started to have some kind of a dialogue, some kind of an understanding to with some of the doctors. I ended up with a situation where I could sit in the office and I could say to them, I know you can't tell me anything, but if you look out the window over there, I'm going to assume that you're telling me the answer is no. Then I would ask them a question. And, you know, it was incredible. And we were able to communicate. And what I found was they wanted to help. They wanted to have a partnership, but they were hamstrung by this too. So I always suggest that people get a little bit creative with all of this. And then I also talked a lot about the experience as a mother. And I'm finding that this book is resonating greatly with mothers, other people too, and also not just mothers of kids with mental illness, because it is a pretty universal experience, except maybe to the extreme degree when your kid has serious mental illness. But, you know, I've always been a person who, like I said, I am pathological about fixing things. And the universe brought me something that was not fixable, at least not by me. And I had to learn a whole different way of living and a whole different way of coping with this. And then that shift in me, I was able to impart to my daughters as well. And they're like the new improved model where they deal with this in a whole different way and they advocate for him in a whole different way. And I think that young people going out into the world who this has been normalized, for lack of a better phrase, it's going to make it easier for other people to start incorporating this reality into their lives, into our culture, because it's just absurd that we don't talk about this. And so I think that that's a way of moving forward and making a difference. And the feedback that I'm getting from a lot of mothers is that they finally feel heard, that they finally feel understood, and that the book makes them feel like they're not the only ones dealing with this, not the only ones making mistakes and having these kind of pitfalls and problems. And then once we talk about it with each other, then it also becomes something that we get answers from also. So once Nick was compliant and he was in a good place, I decided to start writing this book and to do my advocacy. And it's I think that now when I look at him, I realize that now one of the things that we mothers do that's very detrimental is we get stuck on the way we thought it was going to be. And this is something that I've heard from hundreds of mothers now that I've talked to, is letting go of how you thought it was going to be with your kid and moving forward from there. And it's really hard because from the moment they're born, you're in love with their future, with all your ideas of how it's going to be. And it all exists in its complete form from that moment forward. And letting go of that is hard. But once I did, I found I was able to go meet my son where he really was. And then we were able to move forward from there. And that enabled us to live a much more realistic life. And it enabled me to stop spending so much time, you know, on Facebook, looking at his friends and reading what they're doing in their lives and agonizing about the fact that he's never going to have exactly that life. And now I look at him and I see, okay, maybe he's not going to have the life that I thought he was going to have, but he is one of the most intrinsically good human beings I've ever known, and good to a degree of kindness and gentleness that even schizophrenia, a disease that arguably manifests itself in ugly ways and violent ways and frightening ways, couldn't touch his goodness. And I look at him and I'm proud of him for that. And now in these last year or so, we're changing his medication and he's switching over to a drug called clozapine. And I encourage anybody here who's dealing with schizophrenia, who is interested, reach out to me. I'll give you some information, because not only for Nick, but I've seen now in many, many cases that this drug really is a game changer. So, so the book is my story for other moms and for other family members. It talks about the mental health system and how impossible it is and navigating it. And the only reason I haven't gone too much into talking about that here and now is I generally assume that people already affiliated with NAMI don't need me to tell them how bad the mental health system is. But, and then also it's a legacy of and for my son, who, you know, I look at him now and he's so different than he used to be. And I want something to be there in the world that represents who he was as well as who he is now, and that will exist beyond me being here, because I feel like it's my eyes who see truly who he is. And so what I'm going to do, because I find that when we do the questions, then we can really get into the areas that people are interested in. So I'm going to read just one other little small part, since we talked about the mother issue, because to me, that is a big part of what this story is. Mother love, it rushes through our veins, escapes sometimes in the form of salt water at the intersection of eyelids and the edge underneath. But it will never leave us. There is no real exit. It doesn't wane, mother love. It lives in the body, the corporeal residence of grief, loss, and joy. All this commotion might reside in my heart, or in a fingernail, or my lower back. Who knows? But this I know for sure. I hold it in my body, the same body that grew them. Over and over, we send that love out there like a folded paper boat, which will, incongruously, float merrily along for a while. Water, which devours paper, plays along, but eventually it nibbles at the bottom edge of the construct, reminding us of the truth of the physical world. Tomorrow, when you walk by the pond, a puff of mush will lie unseen at the bottom. But even that doesn't change a thing. Mother love. So if we have questions, we can do that now, or I can keep talking, but why don't, do we have questions, Gary?
As a matter of fact, I don't see anything in the chat room, but first of all,
I don't know if they can hear you.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much. I'm smiling, I'm laughing. You want to make me cry. It's fantastic. I mean, everything you said was spot on. I'm just going to share something with you because yesterday I was on a webinar with the University UC Davis on their annual psychosis symposium. And Dr. Stephen Marder from UCLA gave a presentation on treating treatment-resistant schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
And he's talked clozaril. So a couple of things he said that I just like to share with the group is that, so first of all, he said that if an antipsychotic medication doesn't work in 2 weeks, stop using it. Okay, then he said, we wait too long to start Clozaril. And he says nationally, only 2 to 5% of the patients with schizophrenia are receiving Clozaril. And his clinic at UCLA, he says, and I only handle the difficult cases I know, 40% of my patients are receiving Clozaril. He says his goal in life is to see that more patients with schizophrenia receive Clozaril, and he admitted that side effects are more difficult, but so they can be managed.
That's the thing. You know what? The side effects actually are not any worse than any of the other antipsychotics. The issue with Clozaril is you have to do this blood work weekly for the first 6 months because there's a condition called agranulocytosis, which can develop, and that can be deadly. So you can't let that happen, but it's perfectly controllable. It's just you have to do this blood test. So when you think about the difficulty of getting somebody compliant on medication alone, and then you add to it, they have to get themselves to the clinic and have a blood test once a week. The doctors don't want to deal with it. It's just a pain to administer. Now, the doctor that is treating Nick is actually in New York, and he has a son with schizophrenia who was diagnosed at 14, and he's a doctor. He's a nephrologist. But when his son got sick, he became like a schizophrenia nerd, and now he and his wife are both doctors, and they only treat people with psychosis, and he's like the clozapine guru.
Yeah, I'm just sure. My son's been on Clozaril since 1991, and it saved his life.
Yeah,
And
I'm
it probably saved our family too.
Yep. That's the thing. And so if anybody's interested, I have lots of information about that as well.
So I have a question from Mary McCourt that says, in your advocacy, what are you hoping to change in the system and how are you doing it? Wow.
It's a big question. Okay. What I think is the most important thing at this point is, in terms of serious mental illness, is treatment. Is we need beds and we need treatment. And, you know, there's a whole thing of IMD exemption and changing the HIPAA laws a little bit and all of that. SARTA, the Schizophrenia and Related Disorders Association, they've got a whole manifesto. That's what I agree with, and I'm working with them to do that. So I think that the treatment thing is really important. I think it might not be a bad idea to separate out serious mental illness as its own category too. But in terms of the overall system, this may not be completely popular opinion, but it's my opinion that in the last 10 years or so, so much energy and so much money has been put into these spectacular campaigns to raise awareness about mental illness. And they talk about stigma and they talk about early intervention, and all these things are really important. But I think that there's an inverse proportion in terms of where the funding's going. All the money is going to, or the bulk of the money is going to create these campaigns that talk about stigma and being open and talking about it, huge, expensive, $1 million campaigns. And meanwhile, your son is psychotic and there's not a hospital bed in the country for him. That's got to shift. We need to shift the more serious the mental illness, the less attention it's getting. And I think that that's a really important part. And then I also think that including the family in the treatment is very important too.
Okay.
I think there's a question there about coping.
Yeah,
as a mom.
yeah. The next one from Carol Carpenter. Please speak more about coping as a mom. Also, do you have any tips on communication with the sick person?
Okay, well, when in the bad years of this, the first few years when I was just basically running around like a little machine, trying to keep everything together and pretending everything was fine, which was, as a mother, I will definitely advise a terrible path to take, because your other kids know what's going on, and pretending everything's normal just makes them feel like they're crazy too, because they see what's happening. And I was just acting like, oh no, everything's fine. And so that was a big mistake. And during those years, I would keep everything together during the daytime. And then at night, when everything had settled down and the girls were doing their homework, I would lock myself in the bathroom and run the shower and drink red wine and have a good cry. And it wasn't a very good, very healthy coping mechanism. And one night I came out of the bathroom and walked right into my youngest daughter. And I was busted. Clearly I was crying. And she says, Mom, why are you crying? And I said, I'm crying because I miss your brother. And she said, what do you mean you miss him? He's not gone, he's here. And I said, yeah, but he's not who he was supposed to be. My 9-year-old looks me in the eye and says, yeah, he is. It's just not what you thought. And that was like, boom. She walks nonchalantly off to her room. And I sat down in the window seat and I thought, I think that's one of the most powerful things anybody has ever said to me. It was like a light went on. And it's back to what I was saying before. In the weeks to come, I had a real shift in perspective, and I realized I have to let go of the way I thought it was going to be. I have to look at Nick and see who he is, not my idea of a future that's not going to materialize. This is how he came to us. And we may not have been able to see that at the time, but this is the son that I brought into this world, and I damn well better learn how to be his mother. It was on me. And once I started doing that, stop looking at him and bemoaning and lamenting what wasn't going to happen, but realize, okay, this is the son that I got. I better be a good mother to him. Things really improved. And as far as, what was the other question about? Communication. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of the book, I'm Not Sick, I Don't Need Help by, what's his name?
Javier Amador.
Amador, yeah. Just read that book. Nothing I can say can add to that. Anybody who wants help with communicating with a sick person, he's the guy. He's the guru. He's got it figured out. Read that book. He's got something called the LEAP program, which is listen, empathize, action, and plan. I think just read the book. It's all there. You don't need to hear from me.
Okay, the next question, Miriam, thank you for sharing your story and writing a book for us moms, us dads too. As I'm sure you have heard this before, I feel our stories with our sons mirror each other. As you were going through this with your son, did you have good family support?
It's hard, because people don't get it. So like my siblings, they love me and we're close and they care about me, but they were afraid of him. And they didn't really get it. And they would say things, you know, as time progressed and he got worse and worse, you know, and then eventually he couldn't live in the house. I had 2 little girls still at home. And they would say things like, well, I don't understand why you don't just take him to live with you. And it was very difficult because it was just, you know, it was hard. People just didn't get it. Now, within the family, as I'm sure everyone knows, it's so chaotic and it's so disruptive. And it was, you know, it was very hard on my marriage. It was, my husband's experience of this is very different than mine. And he had a really hard time coming to terms with it. And he still does. I mean, I don't know about you, Gary. I mean, I don't know about everybody, but my feeling about this from what I've seen is that it's a lot harder, I think, for men, especially with their sons, because it keys into a whole other group of emotions and masculinity and father and son and how he reflects you and all that. Maybe for a mom, it's more organic and we're able to, you know, maybe I don't see my son reflecting me as much as my husband does, but it was very difficult. So for many, many years, it was just trying to hold it together. Now it's been 15 years and my husband and I have just celebrated 40 years together. But it almost destroyed the family. The real support that I got was from my friends. And then as time went on, the real sort of meat and potatoes, usable help that I got was from other people going through it. You know, I was talking to, I gave a talk at SARTA the other day, and one of the women said this. She always says when her son first got sick, she didn't know anybody in the world, none of her friends had ever had this experience. And now all her friends have sons with schizophrenia. Like it shifted to where she moved to a place where she wanted to be with people who got it. So, you know, I haven't done that. I mean, I still have all my friends, but I think that there is something to be said for dealing with people where you don't have to qualify or explain in the same way.
Yeah, I'm just, before I go to the next question, I'm trying to make this brief as being a father.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard on fathers. And my wife, Sandra, and I have taught the family to family course 35 times.
Wow.
And I finally got it, kinda, I think. But fathers want their sons to grow up to be independent, be able to take care of themselves, and be successful in the world. And when you get a son with schizophrenia, that all goes away. And so it takes a while to deal with that and to understand. That's it. Then the next question from Tammy Brandt. Tammy, good to see you. My friend has a son and wants to know how to deal with a son that doesn't want treatment most of the time. He lives on the streets most of the time. He uses drugs, is involved with the court system. She also needs to speak with a person who has a child with schizophrenia. She feels alone, isolated, and likes she's the only one.
Yeah, well, I think we can all relate to that feeling. As far as the anosognosia, you know, the not thinking that you're having no insight and not wanting treatment. I mean, this is the scenario of what we're talking about. And there's tens of thousands of mothers asking that same question. You know, before all this happened, I lived in LA all our lives, and I would drive down the street and I would see the person who's psychotic on the corner of the street screaming at somebody who wasn't there, filthy and dirty. And I would look at him and I would think, where's his mother? Like, what the hell? Why isn't somebody taking care of this? How is this? Where's his family? Where's his mother? But now I understand how this works and how impossible it is to navigate this system, and how this scenario of the son on the street with drugs and in and out of the prison, that's what our culture calls the mental health system. And I understand now how that can happen. You know, I'm a pit bull. I'm a pit bull, and I'm also very privileged. You know, I'm white, I've got some money in the bank, and I have an education. And this almost brought me to my knees. many, many times. This almost killed me. And I'm not being, you know, I'm not being exaggerating. And so now I realize, what about somebody who doesn't have the resources I have, or the, you know, the personality? Well, of course, how can you deal with this? And so one of the things also that I think that is very important is the Aot treatment, you know, the assisted outpatient treatment. And that's something that's a legal battle that's being fought, because people who are in psychosis, like your friend's son, there's only one thing that's going to get them off the streets and out of psychosis, and that's the Aot program, where they're in front of a judge and the judge says, you've got two choices. You can go to prison, or you can accept this treatment. And then the Aot makes sure they take their meds. And I know there's a lot of controversy about this, and there's a lot of people who don't agree with this. But my belief is that with psychosis, with serious mental illness, the very organ that is afflicted, your brain, is the organ that will allow you to understand that you're sick. So how can you allow that person, unmedicated, to make decisions about their treatment? You have to bring them out of psychosis to a point of lucidity, of clarity, and then move forward from there. And all these ACLU type rights about forced medication, I'm sorry, but I disagree with that. You know, in our culture, when people have Alzheimer's and you call the police and you say, my mother's wandering out in the snow barefoot, a very nice policeman comes and helps her and takes her home and makes sure she's safe and took her medicine and all of that. That same policeman, when I call him about Nick, is going to go and arrest him. And maybe he'll get in jail, or maybe he'll end up dead. We've all seen it on the news numerous times recently. And then you add to that the culture and how much more difficult it is for people of color or people not with privilege, not with money. And so that's what has to change. You wouldn't let a person who is inebriated, who's incredibly drunk, who came to the hospital and had a car accident, make decisions about their treatment. You treat them until they get sober, and then they can take the ball from there. It's the same dynamic. So that would be what I would have to say about that part of things. And as far as feeling alone and feeling isolated, yeah, I mean, that's what we feel like. But the thing is, you're not alone. Read the book. Call me, I mean, there's all these support groups. We're not alone. There's so many of us dealing with this. And we need to talk about it.
Okay, there's evidently a question, and I think you kind of answered this. And where was, let's see, I just lost it, but not for long. Yeah. There's a question in the Q&A about how to cope and communicate with someone in denial of their schizophrenia. And I think you mentioned Javier.
It's Javier's book. That's the book. That's exactly
I'm not sick. I don't need help.
Yeah.
It costs $17 from Viking Press. And then and the other thing, if you take the family to family class 5 on communication, on I statements and reflective statements, and you know, that was a great class. And so those are two things that I would say. And then the question here, well, then we'll get to the important question. But my son has schizophrenia and involved with NAMI. I would like to advocate more, but my son is not comfortable at this time with me going public, or I try to protect his privacy. Has your son always been okay with sharing your experience?
It's an important question. You know, it was something I had to really grapple with, the ethics of this, because when I started writing the book, Nick was not, I mean, this was 4 years ago. Yeah, he was not in our world. You know what I mean? He was in his own world then. And we didn't know if it was ever going to change. And I just thought, I'm not even going to think about it at this point. I'm going to write the book. Now, in all honesty, I have to say that there are some things that have happened that I've witnessed that I haven't told another human being on this planet. And I never will, not even my husband, because it's too awful and it's Nick's and it's not mine to tell. And so as I wrote the book, I was very careful about that because I thought, okay, I'm going to write this in a way that if he was lucid, I feel like he would be okay with it. But it is something that I grappled with. And then he started getting better and more connected. And so, you know, he knows about the book. He knows that his artwork is on the cover and he's very happy about that. He's asked to read it a couple times, but then when I want to give it to him, then he says, you know, no, yeah, he won't read it. And honestly, I don't really want him to read it. I think it would just be upsetting for him, but I wouldn't deny him it. But as far as, is it Trish and your son about the privacy, it's an important thing that you've got to keep in mind. And I would say, if you want, I mean, if you want to be an advocate, if you want to advocate, you can do that without talking about him. As far as, I guess, you know, if he doesn't want like his aunts and his uncles and, you know, family friends to know, I think that needs to be respected, but it makes it much harder for you. It's just an extra added burden. And I'll keep you posted on how okay my son is with this, because now he's on the clozapine. I think that the reading of the book is imminent.
I'm just going to add one short thing to that. This is a family discussion we've been dealing with for 35 years. And in the beginning, my son didn't want anybody to know. But as he got better, he gave me permission. His quote was, "You can share my story with anybody who you think it might help." And so that's the way we go now.
That's good.
And the next big question is, what is the best way to get your book?
Oh, well, okay. Well, I see somebody posted the link on Amazon, and I will type in here my website, because if you go to my website, it has everything on there. You get to see pictures of Nick and his artwork, and then if you go to the part about the book, now this isn't a link, I'm just writing what it is. And if you go to the part about the book, there's links to buy at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, your indie bookstores. It's all on there. It's very easy.
Okay, I think this will probably be the last question. Thank you for this presentation. Having a child with physical needs, though not mental illness, some of what you say resonates. One question is a healthcare person, a nurse. What can we do to better work with people who have mental illness and families to serve their needs? Do you have some key suggestions about how we can be better advocates?
Well, I would revert back to my idea about the secret code with the doctors that I developed. I think that one of the best ways to sort of hedge around HIPAA is to just listen, you know, get the parent in there and ask them questions and listen, because the thing is, you're going to get information that's useful. Because like I said, we're the ones who are documenting the disease and the progression. We know the details. You're seeing them for a visit. You get that information, and then also, nobody ever did that with me. I mean, if I had a nurse come and say, "Mom, come here, sit down, talk to me, tell me what's going on. You know, do you have anything you want to say?" I would have done a whole lot in the direction of helping my mental health. Because the thing is, you feel like you're just screaming in a windstorm. And so I think as inclusive as you can be, and I think that the ultimate result will be a better prognosis for your patients, because this is a disease, mental illness, that it really takes a village. It's not, you can't just give them a medicine and everything's fine. It takes a tremendous amount of support. And and a commitment to the future of that person. It's not something that's just going to be resolved with an operation. It's a change of a whole life. So, I mean, I think that would be it. I mean, isn't that the best for any advocate, to just listen, to hear and take into consideration the other players? I mean, I have so many stories of mothers. I mean, in my clozapine group, because all the parents have a Zoom meeting on Sunday, every Sunday I hear stories about the psychiatric hospitals just shooting the kids out into the street in the middle of the night and not informing anybody, and the kid ending up in jail or beat up, or, you know, in a homeless shelter. You know, I mean, and the parents are there. They want to take care of their children, and they don't keep you in the loop, and that's a bad thing.
Amen. So I want to thank, and I know we didn't get to all the questions. I just checked on the question and answer and see we missed a few, but more or less our time is up. I want to thank Mimi, pardon me,
Either
for
one.
a fantastic job. It's it's just greatly appreciated, and I'm sure that all the family members on the Zoom call really want to thank you and appreciate what you've done. I'm going to encourage you.
Let me just say also to everybody, I'm really accessible. And so if anybody has a question or wants to talk or whatever, just contact me through the email. And if anybody I've been doing NAMI meetings and talking at hospitals, but also I was so depressed about COVID and I couldn't go around. And then I realized that now all the book clubs are meeting virtually. So I'm doing book clubs all over the country. So if anybody has a book club and they want to do the book, let me know and I'll come to your meeting.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And again, I'm just going to do a brief advertisement here on November 24th. Our next Zoom call will be Mental Health Apps, the Present and the Future, by Brett Coleman, co-founder of Waypoint Health Technology, and Laura Stanley, PhD at MSU, and Stephen Hayes, founder of What If Ventures. So that's on the 24th. So think about it. And again, Miriam, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you
You're
for having me.
fantastic.
Okay.
Love you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everybody.
Thanks everybody for attending. Hmm.